You know, when I took a job at Wyoming Indian High School, I didn't realize they even had a wrestling program. A little bit about myself. I grew up, was born and raised in the state of Alaska. It's very similar to South Dakota, where we had a two-class system. And in my opinion, that was some tough wrestling. I was in the smaller school division, but we traveled all over the state. You know, we drive 8 hours to go wrestle Fairbanks, and that was just the norm. So that's a little bit about my wrestling history. When I was done with high school, I was good. I hung up my shoes. I was happy with my career. I decided I was going to go play college football. So when I was offered a coaching position as the head wrestling coach, I decided, okay, you know, we'll try this out. We'll see what we can do. And mind you, this was 10 years after I'd wrestled my last match. I had looked at wrestling. I had talked about wrestling. My wife's family is a wrestling family. She went to Rapid City Stevens. Stephanie Burry was her maiden name, so if you've been around there, you might have known Matthew Burry. Went to a couple of tournaments and was, you know, like, oh, cool, wrestling. But I was out of the game. So again, I'm setting the background here for you, because what I'm going to talk about is really not about building wrestling skills. It's going to be about building the culture. Because where I work, basketball is king. I know that my two Wyomingite coaches here, you know Wyoming Indian. Anytime that somebody talks about Wyoming Indian, it's about the documentary. There was a film done about 10 years ago about how our school is this phenomenal basketball school, and that basketball is king. It's the culture, it's what we do. And I came in deciding, you know, I want to do something a little different. I wanted to say, you know what, it's okay if you're not a basketball player. You know, a lot of kids look at me and say, well, you know, hey Todd, you're tall and lanky, you must be a basketball player. No, I don't like this whole no contact kind of thing. I very much like to be in your face. I like to be a violent individual. So I decided I wanted to challenge that. And in order to do that, I kind of had to deal with some demographic realities. Our school is 99% Native American. We have one white kid in the entire school. I'm not making that up. He was on the wrestling team. I had him for all 4 years. Our entire school is free and reduced lunch. We are a Title IX school. We have 154 students. Currently, our graduation rate is a little less than 63%, and 20 to 21% of all of our students have some sort of disability or learning issue. So, just again, kind of setting the tone here. Born and raised in Alaska, we were very much culturally integrated. You know, if you were Hispanic, if you were African American, if you were Asian American, it didn't matter. We all went to the same schools, we all dealt with the same stuff. So coming in, I had to look at that and kind of set some goals, set some parameters on how I could build a program and not compromise my integrity in the process or change who I was. So you'll notice I gave you guys some notes. I'm going to do a lot of talking with some bullet points, but so feel free to take notes or ask questions. First off, I'm going to talk about my philosophy, you know, how I decided to do things. When I started, I wanted to be very clear about my expectations and very clear about what I would expect and what I would tolerate. Next, I talk about goals. Everybody's got to have them. You know, I steal a whole bunch of stuff from a whole lot of coaches. And a common theme is you got to have goals for your programs. Next, the big piece is going to be culture, how I decided to build that culture and why I built that culture. Next piece is thievery, because we're coaches, we steal everything. I'm going to talk to you about how I go about it. Branding was important, and then some specific resources that I used as a coach and as a teacher to be a little bit more effective. Now, I want you to know, I'm going to give you a little visual on this. This was my first wrestling team right here. You'll notice we're not big. We had a young man here who was a sophomore on the right here, and a senior on the left. I was very fortunate to be dealing with these young men. It worked out that our young man on the left placed. First kid to ever place in Wyoming Indian history was my first year. I was very fortunate to have him. He was an asthmatic, and you know, when we talked conditioning at the beginning of the year, it was not something that was a good conversation. But by the end, he was able to buy in and take fifth which had never happened in our school's history. So anyways, this is what I was starting with. I actually had a third guy, which I'll talk about here in a little bit in my presentation. All right, so first things first. You gotta have a code and you gotta die by it. You know, I have been a part of quite a few programs as a hockey player, as a wrestler, as a football player, as a soccer player. I played a lot of sports. Any chance I got, I would go play something. And I've had coaches that were wishy-washy. I've had coaches that were drill sergeants. And the ones that I respected the most were the ones that were very much toe the line, do it this way because this is how we do it. And that's something that I brought in. A little bit of an issue with working with my kids. A lot of my kids don't get that kind of solid rule situation at home or in school. So that was totally shifting the paradigm for a lot of these kids. You know, I tell them, hey, you be at practice at 4. 4:05 rolls around. All right, coach, I'm ready. Cool. Go start running the halls. Well, I'm only 5 minutes late. Well, okay. I said 4 o'clock, right? Well, yeah, I didn't think you were serious. Too bad. Go hit the halls. You're gonna run a little bit, you come back. That did take a little bit of work to build in, but you know what? Authenticity matters. Something that I'm stealing from Rob Miller, say what you mean and mean what you say. If I told a kid I wanted him there at 4, I better not show up at 4:01 or 4 o'clock. I better be there before the kids. And that took a little bit of trying on my part. My wife and I had lots of conversations about, well, wait, why do you got to be there half an hour early? I got to meet my kids there. They got to see that I'm dedicated. Coach the child, not the sport. Taking 10 years off from wrestling really kind of didn't give me a lot of options in this department. You know, I was learning about this sport as I was going. You know, I knew the basics. I knew my double. I knew my single. I love my half Nelson. Okay, I'm a tall, lanky guy, but I am very much a basics, win matches kind of guy. And I wanted to coach the child, not the sport. I decided that, you know what, it's not going to help a whole lot if I'm teaching a kid a million moves and they're not going to buy into what I'm doing. So that kind of segues into my philosophy. But I wanted to put a little piece underneath here. I have a no-cut policy. I will not cut you if you come out for the team. I won't. I will not cut you because you lose matches. I won't cut you because of you know, missing a practice. If it becomes habitual, then we'll have a conversation, an individual conversation. But I've only ever cut 2 kids in my life on this team. Now I've only been at it 6 years, so you know I'm sure there'll be more. My first season, I cut a kid. He was our senior, and he was the stud. He was a kid that could walk on a mat. He was big enough. He was strong enough. He was athletic enough. He could beat some kids without any real skill. One of the first things I set up was no soda pop. That was a rule. We got a high rate of diabetes. I care about these kids' health. I said no soda, not during the season. You know, I can't stop you on the weekends. I can't stop you from having one supper with your parents, but you will not have a soda pop at school. You will not have a soda pop at practice. You definitely will not have a soda pop at a tournament. You know, and my reasoning for that was the amount of sugar, the amount of caffeine. I don't like what it does to you. We're working our bodies way too hard. So he decides he was being a jerk in practice, and I said, go sit for a while. Come back here when you're ready. I told you there are no soda pops allowed in this wrestling room. And he decided to flip lip, and I said, okay, there's a door. Mind you, I had 3 kids in my program at this time. I had 3. I'm all by myself. I'm the only coach. I'm the manager. I'm the mom. I'm the dad. I'm everything. And I kicked this kid off. I had a little conversation with my principal that next day. Like, why'd you kick this kid off? Wasn't listening. He decided to be a jerk about it, make a show of it. We need to bring him back. No, I do not. I do not. I realized this kid was probably the better wrestler in our building. I don't want him. He's got a bad attitude, and I cannot deal with a bad attitude. So I ended up winning out. I don't know how, but I did. So he ended up not being able to wrestle for us. But I think it set the tone for our other 2 guys. You know, like I said, our one senior, he decided that he bought in, he was ready to go, he was going to work as hard as he could, and ended up placing 5th. Second kid. This story, it was from this year. Kind of breaks my heart still, but this kid was having some problems, mental, physical, emotional problems, and wrestled for me for 3 years. This was his senior year, and decided to break the rules and skip practice. Just overtly took off. Him and his girlfriend after school. Well, I did my due diligence and I contacted the parents and did all that good stuff like a good coach does. And he decided to make some accusations about me as a professional and as a coach that I said, you know what, I can forgive you guys. I really can, because I love every one of my kids, but this is not something we can have on the team. Wrestling is something where I have to be able to take my eyes off you a couple of minutes a day for a tournament. Like, hey, I gotta go help this kid. I got my back to everybody else. I don't want to be thinking, what is it that this kid is doing when I'm not paying attention? So we ended up telling him he was no longer invited to come out. So that was the only other kid I've ever kicked off a team. And both of them had to do with attitude. They had nothing to do with skill. You know, if I got a really tough kid that has a bad attitude, I'll probably kick him off too, if it really needs to happen. But my philosophy is I want to coach the kid, not the athlete, or not the sport. And your attitude will get you far in life. Those are my 2 real philosophies here. And then the last one, work with what you have. All right, you saw my demographic. I've got a bunch of basketball players, or kids that think they're basketball players. The kids that I usually get for wrestling are not my athletic kids. They're my kids that are coming out, you grab them by the arm and you can feel their bones. You're like, holy jeez. You know, you got to figure out how to take that and turn that into a champion, or at least get them as close to a championship as is humanly possible. You know, so it's all about building up the kid. It's not about building an amazing wrestler. You know, as coaches, sure, we want championships, but we got to build that mentality before we can get to the actual championship podium. Oh, sorry. So this is my second year. This is my second year team. You'll notice I have 3 managers. My gentleman on the far right here, he wanted to wrestle and then he ended up having some health issues. He couldn't wrestle. At this time, I got a lot of flack from my AD. You have 4 wrestlers and 3 managers. Yeah. Why? I'm trying to build something here that has very little to do with wrestling and has more to do with building some character. So, you know, this ended up being a real pain in the ass team, but it was mostly because of the drama that I was allowing to happen. But you know, the 4 kids I had, they were bought in. Like, well, coach will bring all these damn managers to help us. Well, let's have some fun while we're at it. So these kids really started to enjoy the program. All right, my next year's up here. We're getting a little bit bigger. Goals. About this time, I decided, you know what, we should probably not just be flying by the seat of our pants. We should have some actual goals. Like, hey, let's win some matches. Or, hey, let's get a takedown. You know, they're working